All right, you guys, this is just going to be a little bit different than what we've done. I've been just recording and having you listen to the sections of the book Thief. But today I'm going to do this screencastify for some sections just so I can kind of guide you through some notes that you might want to take. Okay, so I'm going to read and you can follow along. This is actually in Google Classroom. I have a PDF of the novel, and I have it under part 3 right now, but I'll try to put it under each part. That way you know that it's there all the time in case you forget your book or something. The only problem with this is that it doesn't give you page numbers, so that makes it a little bit more complicated. But it's still good if you ever forget your book or just feel like using your computer. Okay? So enter the struggler. Now for a change of scenery. We both had it too easy till now, my friend, don't you think? How about we forget mulking for a minute or two? It will do us some good. Also, it's important to the story. We will travel a little to a secret storage room and we'll see what we see. A guided tour of suffering. To your left, perhaps your right, perhaps even straight ahead, you find a small black room. In it sits a Jew. He is scum. He is starving. He is afraid. Please, try not to look away. A few hundred miles northwest in Stuttgart, far from book thieves, mayor's wives, and Himmel Street, a man was sitting in the dark. It was the best place, they decided. It's harder to find a Jew in the dark. He sat on his suitcase waiting. How many days had it been now? He had eaten only the foul taste of his own hungry breath for what felt like weeks, and still nothing. Occasionally, voices wandered past, and sometimes he longed for them to knuckle the door, to open it, to drag him out into the unbearable light. For now, he could only sit on his suitcase couch, hands under his chin, his elbows burning his thighs. There was sleep, starving sleep, and the irritation of half awakeness and the punishment of the floor. Ignore the itchy feet, don't scratch the soles, and don't move too much. Just leave everything as it is, at all costs. It might be time to go soon. Light like a gun, explosive to the eyes. It might be time to go. It might be time. So wake up. Wake up now. God damn it, wake up. The door was open and shut, and a figure was crouched over him. The hands splashed at the cold waves of his clothes and the grimy currents beneath. A voice came down behind it. Max, it whispered. Max, wake up. His eyes did not do anything that shock normally describes. No snapping, no slapping, no jolt. Those things happen when you wake from a bad dream, not when you wake into one. Okay, so this, of course, is an important chapter. And obviously there's this Jew who is basically living in the storage room to try to save himself. And he's waking up, not from a bad dream, he's waking up into one. So that means something. Obviously, he's fighting for his life here. No, his eyes dragged themselves open from darkness to dim. It was his body that reacted, shrugging upward and throwing out an arm to grip the air. The voice calmed him now. Sorry it's taken so long. I think people have been watching me. And the man with the identity card took longer than I thought, but there was a pause. It's yours now. Not great quality, but hopefully good enough to get you there if it comes to that. He crouched down and waved a hand at the suitcase. In his other hand, he held something heavy and flat. Come on, off. Max obeyed, standing and scratching. He could feel the tightening of his bones. The card is in this. It was a book. You should put the map in here too, and the directions. And there's a key taped to the inside cover. He clicked open the case as quietly as he could and planted the book like a bomb. I'll be back in a few days. He left a small bag filled with bread, fat, and 3 small carrots. Next to it was a bottle of water. There was no apology. It's the best I could do. Door open, door shut. Alone again. What came to him immediately then was the sound. Everything was so desperately noisy in the dark when he was alone. Each time he moved, there was the sound of a crease. He felt like a man in a paper suit. The food. Max divided the bread into 3 parts and set 2 aside. The one in his hand, he immersed himself in, chewing and gulping, forcing it down the dry corridor of his throat. The fat was cold and hard, scaling its way down, occasionally holding on. Big swallows tore them away and sent them below. Then the carrots. Again, he set 2 aside and devoured the 3rd. The noise was astounding. Surely the Führer himself could hear the sound of the orange crush in his mouth. It broke his teeth with every bite. When he drank, he was quite positive that he was swallowing them. Next time, he advised himself, drink first. Later, to his relief, when the echoes left him and he found the courage to check with his fingers, each tooth was still there, intact. He tried for a smile, but it didn't come. He could only imagine a meek attempt at a mouthful of broken teeth. For hours, he felt at them. Excuse me. He opened the suitcase and picked up the book. He could not read the title in the dark, and the gamble of striking a match seemed too great right now. When he spoke, it was a taste of a whisper. "Please," he said, "please." He was speaking to a man he had never met, as well as a few other important details. He knew the man's name, Hans Huberman. Again, he spoke to him, to a distant stranger. He pleaded, "Please." So think about how he might know Hans Huberman, and think about what that book is, and how he may have gotten it. So somehow this Max guy is asking for help from Hans. And think about all this idea that Hans has been putting into place for over a year, how he is fearful of what might happen. Remember when he slapped Liesel and he was thinking about this plan that he had been creating, and that's one of the reasons why he could not allow Liesel to say she hates Hitler in public, because then they would certainly be suspicious. And if he's supposed to be helping somebody, a Jew perhaps, then he could easily get caught. So, all right, we're going to the attributes of summer. So there you have it. You're well aware of exactly what was coming to Himmel Street by the end of 1940. I know, you know, Liesel Memminger, however, cannot be put into that category. For the book piece, the summer that year was simple. It consisted of 4 main elements, or attributes. At times, she would wonder which was the most powerful. And the nominees are advancing through the shoulder shrug every night, reading on the floor of the mayor's library, playing soccer on Himmel Street, the seizure of a different stealing opportunity. The shoulder shrug, she decided, was excellent. Each night, when she calmed herself from her nightmare, she was soon pleased that she was awake and able to read. A few pages, Papa asked her, and Liesel would nod. Sometimes they would complete a chapter the next afternoon down in the basement. The authorities' problem with the book was obvious. The protagonist was a Jew, and he was presented in a positive light. Unforgivable. He was a rich man who was tired of letting life pass him by, what he referred to as the shrugging of the shoulders to the problems and pleasures of a person's time on earth. In the early part of summer in Molking, as Liesel and Papa made their way through the book, this man was traveling to Amsterdam on business. And the snow was shivering outside. The girl loved that, the shivering snow. That's exactly what it does when it comes down, she told Hans Huberman. They sat together on the bed, Papa half asleep and the girl wide awake. Sometimes she watched Papa as he slept, knowing both more and less about him than either of them realized. She often heard him and Mama discussing his lack of work or talking despondently about Hans going to see their son, only to discover that the young man had left his lodging and was most likely already on his way to the war. Schlock gut, Papa, the girl said at those times. Sleep well. And she slipped around him out of bed to turn off the light. The next attribute, as I've mentioned, was the mayor's library. To exemplify that particular situation, we can look to a cool day in late June. Rudy, to put it mildly, was incensed. Who did Liesel Memminger think she was, telling him she had to take the washing and ironing alone today? Wasn't he good enough to walk the streets with her? Stop complaining, Slockrell, she reprimanded him. I just feel bad. You're missing the game. What does she really want to do? She really wants to just go sit in the library, right? He looked over his shoulder. Well, if you put it like that, there was a schmetzel. You can stick your washing. He ran off and wasted no time joining the team. When Liesel made it to the top of Himmel Street, she looked back just in time to see him standing in front of the nearest makeshift goals. He was waving. Sockrel, she laughed. And as she held up her hand, she knew it completely that he was simultaneously calling her a Zamunch. I think that's as close to love as 11-year-olds can get. She started to run to Grandstrasse and the mayor's house. Certainly there was sweat and the wrinkled pants of breath stretching out in front of her. But she was reading. The mayor's wife, having let the girl in for the 4th time, was sitting at the desk simply watching the books. On the second visit, she had given permission for Liesel to pull one out and go through it, which led to another and another, till up to half a dozen books were stuck to her, either clutched beneath her arm or among the pile that was climbing higher in her remaining hand. On this occasion, as Liesel stood in the cool surrounds of the room, her stomach growled, but no reaction was forthcoming from the mute, damaged woman. She was in her bathrobe again, and although she observed the girl several times, it was never for very long. She usually paid more attention to what was next to her, to something missing. The window was open wide, a square, cool mouth, with occasional gusty surges. Liesel sat on the floor. The books were scattered around her. After 40 minutes, she left. Every title was returned to its place. Goodbye, Frau Hermann. The words always came as a shock. Thank you. After which the woman paid her and she left. Every movement was accounted for, and the book thief ran home. As summer set in, the room full of books became warmer, and with every pickup or delivery day, the floor was not as painful. Liesl would sit with a small pile of books next to her, and she'd read a few paragraphs of each, trying to memorize the words she didn't know, to ask Papa when she made it home. Later on, as an adolescent, when Liesl wrote about those books, she no longer remembered the titles, not one. Perhaps, had she stolen them, she would have been better equipped. What she did remember was that one of the picture books had a name written clumsily on the inside cover. The name of the boy, Johann Hermann. Liesl bit her lip, but she could not resist it for long. From the floor, she turned and looked up at the bathrobed woman and made an inquiry. Johann Hermann, she said. Who is that? The woman looked beside her, somewhere next to the girl's knees. Liesl apologized. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be asking such things. She let the sentence die its own death. The woman's face did not alter, yet somehow she managed to speak. He is nothing now in this world, she explained. He was The files of recollection. Oh, yes, I definitely remember him. The sky was murky and deep like quicksand. There was a young man parceled up in barbed wire, like a giant crown of thorns. I untangled him and carried him out. High above the earth, we sank together, to our knees. It was just another day, 1918. Apart from everything else, she said, he froze to death. For a moment, she played with her hands, and she said it again. He froze to death. I'm sure of it. Okay, so this is Ilse Hermann's son, who died in 1918 during World War I. And it's important that you know this. The whole point in him freezing to death, or she felt like he froze to death. But how have they described Ilse Hermann every time they talk about her? If you look on bottom of page 42, they talk about how she looks defeated. Up here, they describe her as, what did it say? Let's see. She was defeated. She doesn't talk, really. There were just a variety of descriptions about her. She looked like she was always in pain. And so now you're starting to understand, hopefully, why she looks defeated, why she looks depressed, why she doesn't talk, why her house is cold, okay, why she leaves that window open. The mayor's wife was just one of the worldwide brigade. You have seen her before, I'm certain, in your stories, your poems, the screens you like to watch. They're everywhere, so why not here? Why not on a shapely hill in a small German town? It's as good a place to suffer as any. So she's suffering. She's suffering because of the death of her son from 1918, which has been, well over 20 years. The point is, Ilse Hermann had decided to make suffering her triumph. When it refused to let go of her, she succumbed to it. She embraced it. She could have shot herself, scratched herself, or indulged in other forms of self-mutilation, but she chose what she probably felt was the weakest option, to at least endure the discomfort of the weather. For all Liesl knew, she prayed for summer days that were cold and wet. For the most part, she lived in the right place. So she decided to make suffering her triumph. So she feels like she believes that her son froze to death, and now she is suffering like her son did by always having the window open and making it cold in her house. When Liesl left that day, she said something with great uneasiness. In translation, two giant words were struggled with, carried on her shoulder, and dropped as a bungling pair at Ilse Hermann's feet. They fell off sideways as the girl veered with them and could no longer sustain their weight. Together they sat on the floor, large and loud and clumsy. Two giant words, I'm sorry. Again, the mayor's wife watched the space next to her, a blank page face. For what? She asked, but time had elapsed by then. The girl was already well out of the room. She was nearly at the front door. When she heard it, Liesl stopped, but she chose not to go back, preferring to make her way noiselessly from the house and down the steps. She took in view of Moking before disappearing down into it, and she pitied the mayor's wife for quite a while. At times, Liesl wondered if she should simply leave the woman alone, but Ilse Hermann was too interesting, and the pull of the books was too strong. Once, words had rendered Liesl useless, but now, when she sat on the floor with the mayor's wife at her husband's desk, she felt an innate sense of power. It happened every time she deciphered a new word or pieced together a sentence. She was a girl in Nazi Germany. Okay, right there, we've talked about how it was so important for her to read, and it tells you right there. She felt an innate sense of power. It happened every time she deciphered a new word or pieced together a sentence. Okay? words are powerful, and she felt powerful knowing words and starting to understand what's going on around her. How fitting that she was discovering the power of words, and how awful and yet exhilarating it would feel many months later when she would unleash the power of this newfound discovery the very moment the mayor's wife let her down. How quickly the pity would leave her, and how quickly it would spill over into something else completely. So this is foreshadowing here of what will happen later on. She obviously is not going to be pitying the mayor's wife, because something happens and she uses her power of words to get back at the mayor's wife, Ilsa. Now, though in the summer of 1940 she could not see what lay ahead in more ways than one, she was witness only to a sorrowful woman with a room full of books, whom she enjoyed visiting. That was all. It was part 2 of her existence that summer. Part 3, thank God, was a little more lighthearted. Himmel Street Soccer. Allow me to play you a picture. Feet